Welcome back. So this week we are going to do a news of the week, unlike last week where there wasn't really a lot of news that happened, and I just thought, you know what, let's not do a news of the week if there's maybe four news that I of course talk about, and that includes talking about the player of the week and also the weekly power rankings that the league website of course released. But this week we did have some important news and some transfer rumors that has happened and also some injury report that we're going to talk about. But the first news we're going to talk about is a news that I could have easily made a video about this a couple of days ago, and last week I did make a single video talking about the Columbus Crew decided to change their name to Columbus SC, and the ownership decided to kind of just make amends for their fans and say, well, we're going to still call ourselves the Crew, but that's just going to be the nickname, and the fact that that is not going to be no longer going to be on the official team name. Obviously, that has led to a lot of outrage from Crews fans, and what the ownership are trying to do is kind of like a poor excuse for them to say that we're not really get rid of the Crew name, but at the same time we really are with the way that it's been dropped from our official name. So with the outrage that has going on, a week later, it seemed like the ownership decided to backtrack of what they originally did, because this week they have officially announced that they are going to be bringing back the Crew name to their official name, and that their name now is going to be Columbus Crew SC. And this is after meeting with its supporter group, the North Decker, talking about how they were outraged the fact that the team decided to change their name to Columbus SC, and they demand the Crew name to be back with their official name. And basically the ownership basically said, yeah, we kind of screw up in terms of that. And it's great to see that Columbus decided to do this, because nowadays not a lot of MLS team, when they decide to rebrand their name, they don't usually backtrack. But that being said, I also said about how Columbus, with this ownership and this front office, seems to have a good relationship with the fans. Something tells me, I kind of had a feeling this rebrand that they decided to go, and the name that they decided to change, was not going to last very long. I mean, I just feel like if they're really going to show that they have a good relationship with the fans, they of course decided to basically reverse what they did a week ago, and therefore that of course exactly is going to be the case. Now they also have decided to update their logo, and the logo that they updated is still going to be the same as the one that they released last week. Well, I wouldn't say it's still the same. There's only a couple of minor difference. So this is still the logo that they decided to use, and again they still use the main part of the logo with the C. But the only difference is they of course have added the Crew name, and also put the 96, which is the year when the Columbus Crew was founded. And as I said last week, I'm kind of one of those people that is kind of in the minority, and kind of, this might sounds like an unpopular opinion, but I actually do like the new Crew logo. I mentioned how it's the design of it. It's very very unique, and it's not like some of the vectors that I've seen in the league, where a lot of teams always go with the boring circle kind of logo. And also the vector itself, it does resemble something of Columbus, as the vector actually has a similar shape to the Ohio flag vector. And knowing the fact that the Columbus is the capital of Ohio, it makes perfect sense why they decided to do that. Now I can understand why some people don't like it, because of the huge C, and it doesn't look very good. But I also feel like maybe this is just going to be one of those logo that is going to eventually grow on people. People will eventually accept that this of course is the logo that they're going to use, and they're not going to complain again. I think this is kind of similar to a couple of years ago, when they changed the Columbus Crew logo with a bunch of construction worker that was on the original logo, and they basically changed it to the circle logo with the checkerboard. And I think originally people didn't like it, because they kind of like the original one better, but eventually it kind of grow on them, and they started to like the circle logo that the Crew now once again decide to change it to the one that I've just shown. So yeah, I think give it maybe a year or two, I think people will accept the fact that, what, this logo is actually not as bad as what we originally said, that it was just an absolute terrible logo, and they should just go back to the original logo that they of course decided to use. Now, moving on in terms of the next news, and talk about some signings that has happened. Well, there was actually two big signings that happened today. The first signing is NYCFC have decided to sign Brazilian young international forward Thales Magno. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Now, this is a big signing for NYCFC because I heard there is a report that they're going to sign him for about $12 million, and $12 million is definitely a lot of money in terms of NYCFC decided to splash on him. And from what I heard from him, he is one of the more talented Brazilian youth player down in Brazil, and it's understandable why, you know, maybe NYCFC had to pay a lot of money for him. The original club that he is from, I actually don't know the full name of the club, but I do know like at least the first part of the name, as he comes from a club down in Brazil called Vasco, and apparently this club didn't want to let him go, so they decided to slap a big transfer fee for NYCFC to pay for, and NYCFC decided to agree on this. But either way, you know, again, I have heard a lot of good things about him, and that, you know, for NYCFC, knowing the fact that they need forward and need some striker depth, this I think is definitely going to be something that they of course will do, and I'm assuming he's probably going to be starting in games alongside with Tati Castellanos, because again, you know, you don't sign a $12 million player, and especially made him potentially a DP player, and you basically put him on the bench. Now, speaking of Tati Castellanos, I don't know if I mentioned this before, he signed a 5-year contract extension with NYCFC, and that pretty much put to the end of the saga of whether or not, if indeed Castellanos is going to be leaving NYCFC or go and potentially go down to Palmeiras. But now that being said, you know, despite the fact that he did sign this 5-year contract, he can still basically leave somewhere else. But now I have heard some report that most likely NYCFC, if they are going to sell Tati Castellanos, they're probably going to sell him somewhere in Europe, and that they say that, you know, maybe it's going to be the next off season that they'll do it. You know, it's still kind of to be determined when they exactly will do. And I guess maybe this is also another reason why they decided to sign this guy, is that he's going to be pretty much the heir of Tati Castellanos once Castellanos decided to leave, and they hope that he is going to be just as effective or even more effective than what Tati Castellanos is to this NYCFC forward line. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, and another big signing that has happened, Minnesota United, as I actually forgot the D, it's not Minnesota Unite, but it's actually Minnesota United, and actually, let me just do that. It's kind of embarrassing, the fact that I misspelled one of the team that I dearly support. But yeah, the Loons, of course, have signed winger Franco, and I believe it's Frageppan or Fragepani. As I said before, you know, when I first look at how to pronounce a name, I usually just completely mispronounce it. But as time goes, I will eventually get the name wrong, or get the name right, and especially I'll start listening to the broadcasting and listen to how Cal and Kendra basically pronounce his name. Then yeah, I'll basically get it right. But yeah, you know, this is a guy that has been rumored with Minnesota for a very long time. When, you know, we've been hearing the fact that the Loons have been signing these two main player in Adrian Hunu and also Franco Fragepani, and you know, it's been there's been lately some rumors saying that maybe he wasn't going to go to Minnesota, and it seems like FC Cincinnati was going to snap him up. Well, seems like that rumor is now dead, because the Loons officially signed him, and I'm definitely happy the fact that the team finally signed him, and hopefully he is going to be that replacement to Kevin Molino that, you know, a lot of people said that is going to be the case, especially he pretty much played in the same position that Kevin Molino used to play. Now, that being said, it's going to be interesting to see when exactly he is going to start playing for this team, because, you know, I know a couple of weeks ago when the Loons did sign Adrian Hunu still haven't been making a single appearance for the team, and I guess the reason why that is the case is because, you know, I think there might be a clause where he was going to be stay at Rennes until the end of the season, and then he's going to come to Minnesota. And obviously, once he does come to Minnesota, he can't just go straight into the squad and be in the starting 11. He still have to do that 10-day quarantine period. So I'm guessing maybe this signing is going to be the same case where he's going to basically come to Minnesota, but he's not going to be immediately play for the team and have to undergo that 10-day self-quarantine period before, of course, he plays for the team, or maybe this is just a case where he probably have already done this yet, and then we kind of knew that this was going to be a signing, but the club didn't want to announce it until he basically gone through that 10-day self quarantine period. Which, if that is the case, then I think that would be good too, because he could basically go straight into the starting 11. But most likely, I feel like he's probably not going to be in the starting 11 or in the squad of this team, at least for another couple of weeks, and I just can't wait until he is going to be in this team, because it is pretty clear that when you see this Loons team, I know the last two games they got things going, but the attack is still a huge issue with this team, and I've said it before, we need to have more reinforcement on the attack, and hopefully now with us signing who knew, and now Fred Pani is going to be the answer to solve the big issue that we've been having going forward in terms of scoring goals. Now, Leandro Lopez have agreed to mutually terminate his contract with Atlanta United, and apparently, from what I heard from this, is that the reason why he decided to leave is because he had some family issue. And again, anytime when a player decided to leave a club because of family issue, I completely respect that, and especially during this harsh time that we are living in right now. A lot of these foreign players, they have a lot to go through with the way that they're basically stuck in a foreign country, can really travel back to see their family, or maybe even in normal time that kind of is the same case, where they're kind of just stuck in this foreign country until the off season, where they can of course see their family back. It's understandable why Lisandro Lopez decided to leave this team for family reasons. So again, I respect fully on that, and I don't think Atlanta is going to lose that much of his production. I mean, he'd only play a couple games for this team, and I also kind of feel like when they first signed with this team, it was kind of a weird signing for Atlanta. Like, this is a guy that, as much as he is a South American player, which that seems like what Atlanta has decided to do ever since they came into the league, and especially signing an Argentine player. He's a guy that is like in his late 30s and pretty much in his twilight of his career, which is completely against what Atlanta has been always done, which is they always decide to sign these young South American players, bring them up here to the team, and eventually develop them enough to sell them off to Europe for a profit of money. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, and now talk about some of the transfer reports that has happened this week, and this is kind of maybe a weekly report where, every single week it seemed like we always have a big name European star player that is potentially going to MLS to basically grab his one last paycheck before he's retired. And this European superstar player that is going to be coming to MLS to do so is William, as the former Chelsea and current Arsenal winger is rumored to come to MLS. Now, believe it or not, I actually thought that William was maybe in his mid-30s right now, because I know during his time with Arsenal, he has not looked good whatsoever, but that's what you expect. I mean, anytime it feels like whenever Chelsea decide to sell their player to Arsenal, it tends to always never go in the favor of Arsenal, which always makes me wonder, why do Arsenal players still sign some of our former Chelsea player when they know that they're not getting their best, and they're definitely getting some of those players that is way past his prime. Now, that being said, as I mentioned, how I thought maybe William is in his mid-30s with how bad he's been with Arsenal this season. He's only 32 years old, which kind of really surprised me the fact that he's still that young. And if he does come to MLS, I'm assuming maybe he's gonna be like 33 or 34. I actually don't know what exactly his contract at Arsenal is. I believe maybe he have 1 year left in his contract. But if he does come to MLS, let's see which team, of course, potentially is going to sign him. I'm assuming if there is going to be some teams that potentially sign him, it's probably going to be a big market team. So I won't be surprised if Inter Miami decide to do, because again, Inter Miami is a team that always tends to get these kind of wash up or injury play kind of player from the Premier League, and William is a good example of it, and I won't be surprised they may be thinking about doing so, but we shall see whether or not if there's going to be more to this news, or this is just, again, your weekly kind of crazy gossip talk about these European star players eventually going to come to MLS, and it's only used to generate some click for people to see, and it turns out a couple of weeks later that's not even going to be the case anymore. Now, speaking of news that is generate click, Guillermo Ochoa has reported to receive an offer by an unknown MLS team. Now, you notice how I'm starting to see like kind of a trend where whenever there's these reports talk about big name player potentially coming to MLS, they always kind of hide the fact that this MLS team basically decided to do offer him, but we're not going to name him. And I never understand why that is the case. Like, what's wrong with naming an MLS team decided to receive an offer? And if anything, it gives a clear kind of way to see, and maybe even get some excitement in some a specific fan base that, oh, we are definitely indeed looking to try to get this player, instead of just saying, well, I don't know who exactly it's going to be. Although I guess maybe this is the reason why they decided to do it, is that they want to keep interest to every single fan base, that eventually they might be that unknown MLS team potentially sign a star player that is coming out from Europe, or in this case in Liga MX. Now, I also think that this isn't the first time that Guillermo Ochoa has been linked with a team in MLS. I believe a couple of years ago that, of course, is the case. And honestly, I know Ochoa is definitely not like in MLS, and that we saw what he has been with Club America, especially CCL, with all the shithousery that he decided to do so. But for me, I have no problem seeing Memo Ochoa being in MLS. And if anything, I think Memo Ochoa coming to MLS can really create some good headlines and kind of create some good narrative. I mean, in MLS, as much as we have talked about these players that has been not only good, but also they tend to be very, very nice, and they also tends to be kind of heartwarming. Sometimes we also need to have some players in this league that are kind of like have to play like the villain role. And an example of that was a couple of weeks ago with another guy that is named Ochoa, that is David Ochoa, talking about how he is playing the villain role and basically punting the ball into the supporter stand. And that was always obviously a very interesting narrative, even though as a Loons fan I did not really like the way that he was decided to do so. And I can't wait until two weeks later when the Loons does play RSL, whether or not if that narrative is going to kind of carry over into that game. And this could be kind of the same case too with if Guillermo Ochoa. I'm not saying that he's going to do what the other Ochoa is going to do, which is punt the ball into the stands. But if he's going to create some kind of narrative, and also we know he also is one of those goalkeepers that is the master of practicing the dark arts, and maybe that's going to be something that can create these kind of villain narrative that sometimes in MLS that could be a good thing. I mean, as much as we want to always hear about the feel good story, and we want to talk about all these players that is being nice and stuff like that, sometimes we need that kind of storyline where it's like the big villain of a play MLS that nobody tends to like, and that's just kind of part of how narrative, of course, supposed to go. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, is that there's numerous Serie A club is linked with former FC Dallas fullback Reggie Cannon. Now, I haven't heard exactly how good Reggie Cannon has been during his time with Boavista, but I'm not surprised the fact that he's potentially linked with some other club in Europe, because I heard Boavista have got relegated in the first division of Portugal, and I'm assuming a lot of those players, including I won't be surprised that another former MLS player, that is Albert Velez, who went to Boavista along with Reggie Cannon, they potentially could be linked with another club and sold off to another club. And obviously, if Reggie Cannon is going to be linked with another Serie A club, hopefully it's going to be a good one where he might be joining that club and potentially be on the cusp of making this U.S. men's national team, because the whole reason why a lot of these players decide to go make the jump to Europe is that they want to be on that national team radar. And we'll see whether or not if Reggie Cannon is going to get a decent offer from a decent Serie A club, and if he is going to go there and he perform well, he can definitely be on the eyes of the U.S. men's national team. and this player can definitely be one of the guys that I wouldn't say he would be starting for this team, but definitely on the radar in terms of the fullback depth of the national team. Now, moving on in terms of the next news and talk about some injury that has happened this week. Well, unfortunately, Aaron Long, he is now done for the season. He, of course, undergo an Achilles tendon surgery this week, which means that he pretty much is done for this year, and that, you know, this is a pretty big loss for the Red Bulls, knowing the fact that Long is one of their more important center back this season. Although the good news for the Red Bulls is that, you know, I talked about in the beginning of the season when they got I think it was Pereira from Inter Miami, yeah, from Inter Miami, and I thought that was kind of a weird kind of move, and then now with the way that Aaron Long is pretty much done for the season, I'm assuming he's pretty much going to step into that role. And also, I thought during his time with Inter Miami, I thought he was a decent player. Yes, there were times that he, of course, did make some mistake, but you gotta remember, he's still a very young player, and I also kind of thought that him going to the Red Bulls more likely will fit him better than him being at Inter Miami as he was last season. So, yeah, he's going to be stepping in for Aaron Long, that, again, he's going to be done for the season. And also, this could potentially damage Aaron Long and maybe even give any last hope that he is going to make his jump to Europe, because, you know, I thought last offseason when there was transfer rumor of him going to the Premier League, I thought that was really the last chance for him to, of course, make the jump to Europe. He basically decided to stay with the team, and now, knowing the fact that he won't be back until next season, and I think he's going to be really in the prime of his career, I just don't see any other European team that's going to take that risk of potentially maybe signing Aaron Long after he come back from the season long coming back from this surgery that pretty much is going to kill his season this year. Now, moving on, in terms of another injury, is that Nico Lodeiro will be out at least till June with a knee injury. Now, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think this is not as bad as what the Sounders are going to have to deal with. And in many ways, I feel like this is kind of very similar to the Carlos Vela and LAFC situation, where, you know, there's been a lot of question why exactly Vela hasn't been playing for LAFC. Well, I think the reason why that is the case is because LAFC want to protect Vela, and they got to make sure that they don't want to put him right back into the game and potentially risk him to aggravate his injury, and that he might not be available for a very long time. Now the thing about the Sounders is that they're kind of also doing the same thing with Lodeiro, where they're just going to be saving him because they know that how important of a player he is. But unlike LAFC, where they kind of have been struggling, and in some way I would say that maybe they kind of tried to push Vela back into the starting 11 maybe sooner than they anticipated, I don't think the Sounders are going to be in any ways worried about Lodeiro rushing back into the starting 11. Like, it's incredible how great of a start that this Sounders team has been, even though they have some of their star player not available in this team, and also had a lot of changes in the off season that we thought that it was going to really make this Sounders team to take a huge step back and go through a transitional year. No, instead they are right now the best team in the league right now, and as long as if they continue to be the best team in the league, there is really no reason for the Sounders to rush back Nico Lodeiro. Like, heck, they might as well just wait until maybe July or even August if that knee injury is really serious, and just kind of rest him then, if this team, of course, continue to do very well. And, you know, also this is another thing where, you know, if you think the Sounders are scary right now, wait until they, of course, get some of their star player back and get Lodeiro back, and maybe even make another big move during this summer transfer window. Like, if they decide to do that, that is just super unfair. Like, we already know that the Sounders are potentially early MLS Cup contender, but when they do get their star player back and also get more signing, yeah, you know, I mean, I know it's kind of premature to just crown the Seattle Sounders as the MLS Cup champion, and, you know, obviously I did not make, as I mentioned before from last year, I definitely did not make the mistake they decided to crown the Seattle Sounders as the MLS Cup champion in that Columbus Crew MLS Cup final, with the way that even though the Sounders were head and shoulder above the talent-wise of what the Crew had to deal with a lot of injury, I did not decide to crown them because anything, of course, can happen. But the way that they have looked right now, and I would maybe even say that I wouldn't crown them as MLS Cup champion right now, but I definitely wouldn't disagree with people saying that they're definitely a supporter shield kind of team, and that it looks like with them continue to be this good this season, they're definitely going to potentially win the supporter shield this year. Now, moving on, in terms of next news, is that the MLSPA has released salary guide for 2021, and basically this is the MLS Player Association releasing all the salaries that each player, of course, has earned. So if you want to find out how many money is your player is basically earning this season of the team that you, of course, support, then you can, of course, look at that. But I think the big thing I got out of that is that the salary is continue to rise, and it makes sense because under the current CBA, the salary is going to continue to increase, and it's not just the average salary, but also the minimum salary is going to continue to increase under this new CBA that it is basically in place for these next couple of years. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, is that Howard Webb has mentioned that, he talked about how he's very happy with the way that MLS has basically implemented VAR, and that he also feels like other leagues can basically learn from how MLS is basically getting VAR right. Now, as much as I know you instantly say that's absolutely a bullshit kind of statement, saying that VAR is getting right in MLS, because have you seen how inconsistent VAR has in MLS? Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, in some way VAR, there's been times that I definitely get frustrated in terms of how it's been implemented, and especially the whole clear and obvious kind of thing, where I'm still kind of a little bit skeptical in terms of how they implement this clear and obvious kind of thing, and that it still feels like it's a judgment call depending on whoever is controlling VAR. You maybe have some ref that may think this is clear and obvious, and then you have other refs that say that it's not clear and obvious. But I will say that, when I look at VAR and how it's used in the MLS compared to how VAR is used in some of those European League and especially the Premier League, oh yeah, I mean, MLS is definitely getting VAR much more right than what the Premier League and also what the English FA is doing with VAR in terms of some of their domestic competition. Like, over this weekend when I was watching the FA Cup final and also supporting Chelsea and hope that they, of course, win the FA Cup final, they didn't, unfortunately. But one thing that kind of got me very, very angry about that game is that late in the game, I think it was Ben Chilwell that, of course, scored what looked like it was the tying goal for Chelsea, and it looked like that game was going to head to extra time. But VAR decided to disallow him because Chilwell is in an offside position. Now, one thing that I know the Premier League is doing with offside rule, and this is the thing that makes me hate VAR and how they use in the Premier League and also in the FA Cup, is that in terms of how they implemented the offside rule and how they use offside when they look at VAR, they always tend to use these kind of gimmicky kind of lines and kind of rulers and stuff like that. And apparently during that sequence, they think that when they use the rulers and the lines, Chilwell was just in an offside position. And, I just feel like that kind of use of VAR, I just feel that that's completely unnecessary, and in many ways it kind of overcomplicate the whole reason why VAR was bringing there. Like, you shouldn't have to use like these kind of rulers and kind of metric to kind of judge whether or not if a player is offside or not. And I can tell you that is also not the first time I've seen maybe that them using that kind of rule doesn't actually help to see if a player is offside or not. I've seen many cases during this season in the Premier League when they use that kind of system to judge offside, and how many times they got it wrong, and even just like the teensy tiny detail that of course maybe prove the fact that the player is offside, they of course call it offside even though it's just kind of like a teensy bit thing. But either way, I just feel like the way that the Premier League is using VAR, and especially how they use VAR to implement the offside rule, they have just completely overcomplicated and completely show their incompetency of how it's using. And it's no surprise a lot of people, not only watching the Premier League here in the US, but even the people in the UK watching and fans of their team is very frustrated with how VAR is used in the Premier League, because it seems like those referee doesn't actually know how to use it properly. So yeah, that I think that is the reason why I think how Webb is right, and that in some way, the Premier League, I talk about how, we know that they're always known as the best league in the world because they obviously have the best quality of player in the world. Well, there's no doubt that might be a truth, and that they're definitely head and shoulder above MLS. But in terms of VAR, I could say it's kind of the opposite of how it is. Whereas MLS is definitely head and shoulder in terms of how they implemented VAR compared to the Premier League. The Premier League is basically they still try to figure things out, and in some way they're just getting more wrong in terms of how they use VAR than actually how right they are actually doing with this whole system. But now moving on, in terms of the last two news is that Gonzalo Higuain, of course, win the Player of the Week this week, and I know obviously there's going to be a lot of people that's going to be not happy about the fact that Higuain, of course, won it. I mean, yes, Higuain did score 2 goals, but a lot of people feel like maybe a certain guy called Christian Rodon or even Alex Rodon probably should have won it, and because I didn't see Gonzalo Higuain basically play in front of goal like what we saw Alex Rodon did during the middle of the week against the San Jose Earthquakes. But again, even though there is definitely that discussion there, I feel like maybe Higuain kind of deserved to win. And especially, I talk about how when they award Player of the Week nowadays, they usually award it to the player that is kind of the bigger name. And I have no doubt that Higuain is definitely a bigger name than Alex and Christian Rodon, or at least more recognizable kind of name for any casual MLS fan that know that, I know who Higuain is. He's one of the most important player and one of the most recognizable player in this league right now. And then finally, moving on into the last news to talk about the power rankings, and I'm not even going to try to spend a lot of time explaining this because it is very clear once again this week, the power rankings, like, I talked about earlier how VAR is misused in the Premier League. It feels like the power ranking is misused here this season, and how it is maybe getting to a time where maybe I might as well not just talk about the power rankings anymore because of how ridiculous some of the teams are where they are in the standings, and how many spots that they of course moved up. Because I saw this week there were some teams that move up like nine spot, even though they didn't win both of their midweek games, and then I saw a team drop down 11 spot despite the fact that they of course play in the twice on the road in the middle of the week, and it wasn't really like a bad loss that they suffer in both of those games. But in terms of this week power rankings in the top 10, you got the Seattle Sounders currently remains at the top of the standings, maybe, and that this is probably maybe the only team that I think everybody can agree that they deserve to be at the top of the power rankings. Followed by the New England Revolution, who moves up 4 spots from last week. Then you got the Philadelphia Union moving up 1 spot. The Galaxy moving up 5 spots from last week. Orlando City, of course, stay at the same where they were last week. Followed by NYCFC, who actually lost 3 spot last week. Then you got the Portland Timbers, who moved up 3 spot from last week, followed by Sporting KC, move up 4 spot. LAFC, of course, moved down 3 spot last week, despite the fact that they're still dead last in the league. And as much as I am fuming the fact that they're still putting LAFC near the top 10, even though they're dead last in the Western Conference, I'm also not surprised whatsoever. And I might as well just also kind of implement that classic meme of disappointing but not surprised, because that pretty much is explaining my feeling with how LAFC is always find themselves in the top 10 in the ranking, even though they are literally like the worst team in the Western Conference right now, and one of the worst team in the league if you actually look at the amount of points that each of these teams have earned. And then at 10th place we got the Colorado Rapids, making their first appearance in the top 10, and they moved up 6 spot from last week. So yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the news of the week from this week. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of all these news, and as always, if there's any news that I didn't mention and you want me to mention here on the board, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.